In the early part of 1953, a new concept in military aircraft was about to take shape. A concept which evolved from the joint effort of Air Force planners and Lockheed designers, shaped by Air Force experience in recent conflicts. The concept of the lightweight fighter, supersonic, low in cost, easily producible, the F-104.
In the 1950s, when the Air Force wanted speed, they didn't mean fast enough. They meant faster than anyone thought possible. Born from the mind of Lockheed's legendary Kelly Johnson and its Skunk Works team, the F-104 Starfighter was not just a fighter jet. It was an experiment in extremes. A fuselage barely wide enough for a pilot, razor-thin wings, and an engine that could propel it past twice the speed of sound. The Starfighter would go on to become one of the most controversial fighters in history, celebrated for its record, cursed for its losses, and flown by more nations than any other Century Series aircraft. Today, in Chapter 4 of our Century Series story, we look at the F-104, the jet that pushed the limits of design, performance, and sometimes survival. In the early 1950s, U.S. pilots returning from Korea had confronted the MiG-15 with North American F-86 Sabres, and many felt that the MiGs were superior to the larger and more complex American fighters. They wanted something different, a fighter that was small, simple, but built like a rocket. Lockheed's legendary engineer, Clarence Kelly Johnson, listened closely. On his return home, he did what any good engineer would. He asked, what if we built exactly what they asked for? By November 1952, Johnson presented a radical concept to the Air Force, a sleek, lightweight interceptor designed from the ground up for high speed and high altitude performance. With minimal complexity and unmatched climb capability, the project, designated Model L246, used just a single powerful J-79 engine wrapped in a slim airframe weighing around 12,000 pounds, essentially the smallest, lightest, and fastest fighter possible. On March 1953, the U.S. Air Force greenlit prototype development. The result was the XF-104, and within a year it had taken flight. Small, clean, and destined to redefine what a jet fighter could be. The F-104 wasn't designed for dogfights or heavy armament. It was designed to climb like a rocket, fly high, and strike fast. That simplicity and that philosophy would shape the Starfighter's legacy in speed, controversy, and lasting impact. The Starfighter's layout was extreme even by Century Series standards. At just 54 feet long and with wings spanning barely 21 feet, it looked more like a missile than a fighter. Those razor-thin, trapezoidal wings weren't a stylistic choice. They minimized drag at high speeds, allowing the F-104 to reach over Mach 2 and climb like no other jet in service. Power came from the J-79 turbojet, producing more than 15,000 pounds of thrust with afterburner. This combination gave the F-104 blistering climb rate, reaching 50,000 feet in under a minute, an acceleration that pilots often described as being fired from a gun. The cockpit was compact but functional, with a clear bubble canopy for forward visibility and a simple layout optimized for high-speed intercept work. Its armament was equally focused. The M61 Vulcan, a 20mm 6-barrel Gatling gun gave it devastating close-range firepower, while early AIM-9 Sidewinder missiles allowed it to strike from a distance. Later versions expanded their loadout for strike missions, adding bombs and rockets, but the airframe's heart always lay in speed and altitude performance. The trade-offs were obvious. The small wings that made the Starfighter so fast also demanded high landing speeds and offered little margin for error at low altitude. In skilled hands, it was unmatched. In careless hands, it was unforgiving. The XF-104 prototype first took to the skies on February 28, 1954, with test pilot Tony LeVere at the controls. From the very beginning, it was clear that Lockheed had built something extraordinary, and equally clear that flying it would demand skill, discipline, and respect. The early flights confirmed the Starfighter's blistering speed and climb performance, but also exposed its unforgiving nature. As mentioned before, the thin, stubby wings that gave it such low drag also meant high stall speeds and sharp handling quirks at low altitude. Landings required long runways and absolute precision. There was little room for error. Still, the US Air Force saw potential. After some tweaks, including adjustments to the leading edge flaps, a slightly longer fuselage for better fuel capacity, and improved ejection seats, the first production F-104A rolled out in 1958. This initial version served primarily as an interceptor, but almost as soon as the F-104 entered service, its mission began to shift. The USAF's air defense priorities were moving towards longer-range, all-weather interceptors like the F-106, and the Starfighter's role as a frontline US interceptor was short-lived. However, its extreme performance made it highly attractive to allies, especially under the US Military Assistance Program. Lockheed seized the opportunity, developing a series of upgraded versions: the F-104C for fighter bomber work, the 2C F-104B trainer, and eventually the highly successful F-104G Super Starfighter. Production became a truly international effort. While Lockheed built the early batches in California, licensed production spread to Canada, Germany, Belgium, the Netherlands, Italy, and Japan. By the time the last F-104 rolled off in the line in 1983, more than 2,500 had been built. A remarkable run for an aircraft originally designed to be a lightweight interceptor. The Starfighter's journey from radical prototype to global workhorse was anything but smooth. It earned praise for its speed and altitude performance, but also notoriety for a high accident rate, especially in European service. Still, for the pilots who mastered it, the F-104 delivered an unmatched flying experience. Raw, pure, and unlike anything else in the sky. The Starfighter's journey began with two XF-104 prototypes, flown before the J-79 engine was even ready. Even underpowered, they proved the concept. A needle-nosed dart with wings like blades, built for raw speed and altitude. With the J-79 in place, the F-104A became the first production model, capable of Mach 2 and blistering climbs. Armed with the M61 Vulcan and the early AIM-9 Sidewinders, it was a specialist, not a multi-role workhorse, but it delivered on Kelly Johnson's promise of extreme performance. Training pilots for such a demanding jet required a different approach. The F-104B introduced a second seat for instructors, replacing the cannon but giving new aviators a safer path into the Starfighter's unforgiving flight envelope. When the Air Force needed more flexibility, the F-104C arrived. It added in-flight refueling, a broader weapons load, and the ability to carry out tactical strike missions, capabilities that would take it to combat in Vietnam. The most significant leap came with the F-104G Super Starfighter. Developed for NATO, it was stronger, heavier, and built for multiple roles, from high-speed interception to low-level strike missions, even nuclear delivery. Over 1,100 were produced under license in Germany, Belgium, the Netherlands, Italy, and Canada. From there, the Starfighter family expanded to meet specific needs. The RF-104G carried cameras instead of guns for reconnaissance. Italy's F-104S featured upgraded radar and missile systems, giving it improved all-weather capability. And nearly every major operator had its own small tweaks. from Japan's domestically built F-104J interceptors to the F-104 strike fighters in Canadian service. By the end, more than 2,500 starfighters had been built in countless variations. What began as a stripped-down U.S. interceptor evolved into one of the most internationally adapted fighters of the Cold War. When the F-104 entered service in 1958, it came with big expectations. But within just a few years, the Air Force's priorities were shifting. New designs with better radar, longer range, and heavier payloads were already in development, and the Starfighter's narrow focus as a point defense interceptor left it at a disadvantage. The F-104's lack of endurance, limited all-weather capability, and tiny weapons load meant it was quickly pushed aside for more versatile fighters like the F-4 Phantom. In USAF hands, the Starfighter was used briefly as a tactical fighter bomber, but by 1969 it had left active Air Force service entirely. Despite its short USAF career, the F-104 did see combat. In Vietnam, starfighters flew escort missions for B-52 bombers, performed armed reconnaissance, and provided air cover for search and rescue operations. They weren't ideal for the humid, low-altitude environment, and they rarely encountered enemy fighters, but they did the job they were assigned. The F-104's combat story doesn't end there. In the 1965 Indo-Pakistani War, Pakistan's starfighters engaged Indian MiGs and Knots, scoring a handful of aerial victories, though not without losses. If the USAF was lukewarm on a starfighter, NATO was a different story. Through what became known as the Deal of the Century, Lockheed managed to sell the F-104 to over a dozen countries, including West Germany, Italy, Canada, the Netherlands, Belgium, and countries outside of NATO like Japan and Taiwan. In Europe, the Starfighter was adapted into a multi-role strike aircraft, often tasked with nuclear delivery missions under NATO's deterrence strategy. West Germany operated more than 900 of them, the largest fleet outside the US, and other nations integrated the jet into their frontline forces for decades. The F-104 was also quite a record breaker. In the late 1950s and early 60s, the Starfighter became a headline machine, shattering performance records and showing off just how extreme Kelly Johnson's design really was. In May 1958, an F-104 set a world speed record of 1,404 miles per hour, or Mach 2.25, over Edwards Air Force Base. Just a few years later, another Starfighter climbed to a world altitude record of 103,395 feet, an astonishing feat for a manned aircraft of the era. Pilots also used the jet to set time to climb records, blasting from takeoff to 98,000 feet in just 4 minutes and 26 seconds. These achievements earned the F-104 the nickname, the missile with a man in it. Not just in metaphor, but in fact. Although it was never perfect in combat roles, in the world of pure performance, it stood unmatched, showing what was possible when an aircraft was built with no compromises for speed and altitude. For all its speed, the F-104 earned a dangerous reputation. Its small wings, high landing speeds, and unforgiving handling characteristics demanded perfection from pilots. In West Germany alone, over 290 starfighters were lost in accidents, leading to tabloid headlines calling it the Widowmaker and the Flying Coffin. Much of the high accident rate came from pushing the aircraft into roles it wasn't originally designed for, especially low-level strike missions in poor weather. In the hands of well-trained pilots and in its intended high-altitude role, the Starfighter was far safer, but the nickname stuck. While the USAF retired its last F-104s in the early 1970s, foreign operators kept them in service much longer. Italy's Aeronautica Militare flew Starfighters until 2004, an incredible 46 years after the type's first flight. Today, a handful remain airworthy in private hands, appearing at air shows as living reminders of the jet age's boldest and riskiest designs. Now, there's one part of the Starfighter's legacy I haven't touched on here. The infamous Lockheed bribery scandal. In the 1970s, revelations came out about Lockheed paying millions to secure F-104 sales to allied nations, a story that shook governments and left a shadow over an already controversial jet. It's a fascinating and troubling chapter of Cold War history, but I feel like it deserves a full video of its own, and don't worry, we'll cover that story in the future. But for now, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.